The true origins of the modern Neo-Pagan movement of Asatru, also known as Heathenism. It's never easy to find out that one has been living a lie, that we have been deceived after pouring so much passion and energy into an idea, thing, or person. However, the truth should never fear honest inquiry. Please provide me with your patience and read on, for the reward is worth it. In this essay, I will explain how the modern recreation of Norse paganism is built at worst on lies and at best on romanticism. Modern origins. Asatru, or Asatru, heathenism, Odinism, or Norse paganism, is the modern recreation of what practitioners believe to be the religion of the ancient Germanic and Nordic peoples. These groups sprung up independently during the 1960s and the 1970s hippy movement in countries like Iceland, Canada, and the United States. At their core was a term known as Romanticism. Romanticism was an artistic, literary, and intellectual movement that rejected the Great Enlightenment and the stifling nature of the Industrial Revolution. Instead, proponents of Romanticism glorified the past, nature, and medievalism, often removing the harsh realities of those times by painting them in a disconnected but favorable light. This Romanticism also ties into another movement which preceded the 1960s, known as the Vlkisch Movement, a form of romantic nationalism. The term Volkisch comes from the German word Volk, meaning folk, and was a romantic adoration of pre-Christian Germanic culture and the ideals that often delved into ethno-racial and cultural nationalism. The Vlkisch movement was arguably the largest group in the conservative revolutionary movement in Germany. It is important to note that in both the Volkisch and Romanticist forms, Asatru was primarily an ethnic and cultural movement that rejected the modern world in favor of an idealized recreation of the past. A recreation of what? Notice when we see the word recreated, we have to ask, from what? The two surviving books that form the foundation of Asatru are the Poetic Eddas, a collection of poems and stories of gods, heroes, and the Norse creation story, and the Havamal, a book of proverbs attributed to Odin. We could also consider Snorri's work, the Prose Edda, but the Christian influence of that one is made clear within the first few pages, with Snorri using the Christian creation story and the gods being turned into Trojans fleeing the fall of their city. The Romans themselves claim to have sprung from the Trojan hero Aeneas in an earlier myth, perhaps an attempt to unite the two people through shared blood. But what if I told you that the Poetic Edda and Havamal were written around the year 1270 in Iceland, some 250 plus years after the land and its surrounding nations had converted to Christianity? What if I also told you that those books were a collection of stories gathered by Christian monks and priests, and that those works were placed into another book known as the Codex Regius, which was later gifted to the King of Denmark in 1667. All of these things are true, and it should give immediate pause to the truth seeker within us. This one book containing the works gathered by Christian monks some 250 plus years after the country's conversion and gifted to a Christian monarch is the only reliable, surviving record of the Nordic Germanic religions outside of small amounts of archaeological and historical data. We have very little knowledge pertaining to how these deities were worshipped, because outside of a few runestone monuments, the people did not keep written records. The written records we do have are written by Christians and Muslims, and I would greatly assert that Christian and Muslim views were inserted at times into their records. Whether intentionally or unintentionally, like some early drawings of tigers by European artists, none had ever seen a real tiger, just heard stories of them. They could make a cat, but the limbs would be distorted and the features obviously wrong. It's important to realize that this was the exact same state of knowledge for the Nordic Germanic pagan religions at the time. Even if there were a few scattered bands of hardcore believers in the Norse gods, I doubt that they would have sat down to tell Christian monks their stories, rituals, or sacred beliefs. Are the Poetic Eddas influenced by early Christianity? I would say yes, and here is why. It is important to note that during this time period, the Christian Church had been a fully united entity for almost 1,000 years. The schism between the Catholic faction in the West and the original Orthodox Church in the East had happened just 150 years prior. The monks praying in Iceland were very often singing and performing the same rites as their brothers in Egypt or in Rome. Therefore, let us look at the important story in the Poetic Eddas, known as the Runetal, in which Odin receives the magic runestones. I know that I hung on a windy tree 9 long nights, wounded with a spear dedicated to Odin, myself to myself, on that tree of which no man knows from where its roots run. No bread did they give me, nor a drink from a horn. Downward I peered. I took up the runes, screaming I took them, then I fell back from there. Let us then compare it to the Orthodox Antiphon 15. This is a song that is sung on Good Friday Matins, which is the prayer service. Today is suspended on a tree, he who suspended the earth upon the waters. The King of the angels is decked with a crown of thorns. He who wraps the heavens in clouds is wrapped in the purple of mockery. He who freed Adam in the Jordan is slapped on the face. The bridegroom of the church is affixed to the cross with nails. The son of the virgin is pierced by a spear. We worship thy passion, O Christ. We worship thy passion, O Christ. We worship thy passion, O Christ. Show us also thy glorious resurrection. When the two stories are compared together and seen for the chiefly important story of Christ's crucifixion, the similarities become even more extreme. I know that I hung on a windy tree 9 long nights. 3x3, the Trinity times the Trinity. Wounded with a spear, the spear of Longinus. Dedicated to Odin, myself to myself. God is Christ sacrificing himself to God the Father. On that tree of which no man knows. It's important to note that the cross was also known as a tree in early Orthodox tales. No bread did they give me, nor a drink from a horn. Downwards I peered. They gave Jesus vinegar soaked in a sponge to torment him. They did not give him water nor food. I took up the runes, screaming I took them. In Orthodoxy, Jesus enters Hades or hell upon his death so that he can free the soul trapped there. Then I fell back from there and returned to life. What does this mean? Based on the totality of the evidence, which includes the obvious influence of the hippy movement, Vlkisch movement, and the influence of Christianity in many of the writings, I believe that the validity of worshipping Germanic or Norse gods is in serious question. Asatru appears to be a fantastical recreation of what the 1960s or 70s people thought ancient religion was like, minus the parts of it that conflicted with their modern lives. In many ways like the SCA, called the Society of Creative Anachronisms, another organization started in the 1960s. This is a society that prides itself on recreating medieval life, quote, as they ought to have been. It lacks a foundation of truth due to the obvious influence of outside faiths, politics, and philosophies. That's for Asatru. It lacks spiritual authority and tradition, using instead a self-created history with little to no historical backing. As anyone in the modern pagan community can attest, paganism in all its forms is innately chaotic. With no authority or standards, everyone is able to set themselves as a priest, priestess, or gothi. There is no unity of thought, purpose, ideals, or beliefs. I believe this to be chiefly influenced by the Lutheran influence of Western Europe. This does not build a strong society or lend validity to the truth of their religion. In many ways, we can see the Neo-Pagan community as an organization that exists solely to validate the individual's vices, whether physical, mental, or spiritual. I believe this same set of circumstances led to the followers of these beliefs being so readily converted to Christianity in the past. With that said, you're now left with two real options. Option one is to accept that you are living under a falsehood and to make yourself as comfortable as possible with that decision. Option two is to take the harder road of self-introspection and seek the truth. Alternatives? The interesting thing about the Eddas and Havamal is that, even without worshipping the beings talked about inside, they can still be a great source of wisdom and inspiration. You can still take pride in your distant ancestry, preserve the tales, and share them with future generations. You can still strive for inner strength and greater wisdom. You can learn ancient trades, play drums, and enjoy the beauty of nature, but you can do it in truth. For those that sought out Asatru because they felt dissatisfaction with the state of the various Christian churches in their country, I empathize. Please permit this quick bit of history to better understand why things are they are. The original Christian church, hereby called Orthodox Christianity, spread across the Roman Empire long ago. The church had 5 major centers of Christian population called the Pentarchy. Those 5 cities, Rome, Constantinople, Jerusalem, Antioch, and Alexandria, were overseen by bishops that were also called patriarchs. All bishops shared equal rank, but these 5 were shown extra respect due to the power of the cities they served in. The Pope, being the Bishop of Rome, where the Emperor lived, was called a first among equals, as another show of respect. This is in keeping with his other title, the Pontifex Maximus, an ancient title which was given to the most important priesthood in Rome. Time passed, and the Western people of Europe, especially the Germanic people, of whom their Pope Leo IX, had come from, they wanted greater control in their church. The Pope wished to be the highest authority, and many disagreed. After a protracted argument, the church split in half. Since then, we've seen the Western churches split again into Lutheranism, again in the Anabaptists, the Anglicans, Episcopalians, Baptists, Methodists, Seventh-day Adventists, Mormons, and so forth. We see that once one loses their foundation of truth and tradition, they quickly lose the wisdom that came with it. Now, very much like the pagan community, the Christian community in the West is chaotic, with little agreement and sometimes radically different views on theology. But there is that which still stands strong. The Orthodox Christian Church, despite the constant attacks from Islamic forces to the east, attacks from crusading forces to the west, and the scourge of communism and fascism, which murdered untold millions of innocent people and thousands upon thousands of priests and clergy, for 2,000 years it has endured and stuck to its beliefs. Discover what was hidden from you. To find your local Orthodox church, I recommend using Google Maps, or you can contact us at our Facebook page posted below for assistance. You may see your local church using a name like Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, American Orthodox, and so forth. Don't worry. Inside, they will all be singing the same songs and practicing the same beliefs together. The names simply show where that church's authority is held. As America is a land of immigrants, many immigrants brought their faith with them and kept in contact with their original country. Conclusion. Thank you for taking the time to read all of this. I grew up in a non-religious household and spent the majority of my life in search for God. I threw myself fervently into paganism in its many forms, but found it, for reasons like the above and more, to be a hollow pursuit. One need only scratch at the paint to see the rust it's covering. Hopefully I can save you some time in this life by revealing the truth of it to you now, rather than you living a lie or finding it out on your own after many years of waste. Thank you for listening, and come back for more and further essays on these topics and more. God bless.